We are back in episode number 62 of the Piezo Shock Show, and I'm going to be talking about an embarrassing incident that happened. And I'm going to explain what piezo ceramics are through that kind of embarrassing moment. Back when I was a PhD student, learning basic definitions. There's no substitute for making basic mistakes and like getting embarrassed, helps you learn it for life. So let's go. Let's continue. So when I was a PhD student, one of my first projects was to determine thermal conductivity of piezo ceramics, and it's really cool how actually the boundary conditions, the electrical boundary conditions, not only affect mechanical properties. Not only does electrical boundary conditions affect mechanical properties, mechanical boundary conditions affect electrical properties, but also electrical boundary conditions like open circuit, short circuit, and even unpoled. All those properties actually, all those conditions actually change the thermal conductivity, which is really awesome to kind of witness and explore that effect. But in order to calibrate the system I developed, and I wrote a research paper on how do you determine thermal conductivity. It's just another random way of doing it. You basically get something really hot and you see how fast the other side heats up. That's pretty much what it was, and nobody technically did the thing exactly that way. So hey, I got it for my first paper. Hooray. To be read by the world, if you want to search for it. It has my name on it. But in that process, I had to come up with, well, I have to measure standard materials. So one of the standard materials I thought to measure that could have similar properties to PZT in terms of thermal conductivity is quartz, right? And a couple of things come in here, like, isn't it quartz piezoelectric too? Huh. And also, like, there are different crystal planes of quartz, right? And this is my thinking at the time. The different crystal planes of quartz, so probably my measurement of quartz is going to I didn't get that information from the supplier, so I ordered these quartz kind of like little mirrors, like little circular mirrors, and I wasn't able to understand what crystal direction it was, so if I measured thermal conductivity, who knows what it could refer to. So I called the manufacturer and I was like, well, I ordered these, quartz discs, basically they're clear, and I want to know what crystal direction, what's the thickness crystal direction, and I was thinking, well, I got to match it up to some reference paper that's going to tell me what it was, what the thermal conductivity and that the crystal direction was. But they said, bro, this is amorphous. This is fused quartz. This is amorphous. It doesn't matter which side it goes on. It's like the same thing all around. It's not a crystal at all. This is amorphous. And I was like, oh my God, this is amorphous. It doesn't have a crystal direction to it. So whatever literature paper I was going to reference to get a standard thermal conductivity, that was also going to be just fine. However I did it, it's just going to be one value because it's amorphous. It doesn't have a crystal direction. It's just kind of like glass, it doesn't have a long range crystal order, and it's kind of random-ish in every direction. It's short range order. So that actually brings me to the question, though, what are piezo ceramics? That also gets confusing too. So you have that amorphous material, and I believe, so we do have amorphous polymers that can be piezoelectric, but let's talk about the ceramics because those are the ones that I'm typically using for my clients and what I have most experience with. So what's a ceramic? Ceramics are materials made from grains. So basically, after you've manufactured it, we're not going to go through talk about the process of manufacturing, but after you manufacture it, there are grains like right next to each other. Like let's say these are two grains next to each other, and each of them, the diameters are like 3-4 microns, let's say. But within this grain, it's a crystal. There are multiple, so you can call it I don't know, not really called polycrystalline, but they're basically grains next to each other, which are crystals in themselves. They have long range order. Like, if you align all the atoms like this way, you're gonna see like all like this zooming tunnel down. If you've ever used one of those programs that you can view crystal structures in different angles, you'll see like a long range order. Like you'll see to the very end of the screen to infinity and beyond, because everything aligns. But in this case with grains, this interface between the two grains, there's there's a little bit of that amorphous flavor. They're perhaps unfulfilled bonds. There's higher energy states, but basically it's not long range order. That's a ceramic. That's what PZT is. They're grains. It's not long range, and the size of these grains really determine what the properties are, which can be kind of sometimes tricky to handle over the long period of time to keep that consistent. This is another reason why piezo ceramic properties vary, because their properties depend on lots of things, and that's why you got to be prepared. And hopefully you have a ultrasonic transducer consultant, maybe who's dealt with some variation in the past, maybe me, help you out with that. Let's go ahead. So single crystal piezo ceramics, I honestly don't have that much experience with them, but they have long range order. So they'll grow one example of how they're growing, there's like a seed crystal, and you have a hot melt to just, whatever material you need, and you put that seed in and you pull it out, and out comes like a big ingot with that has single crystal properties, long range order. So you kind of grow it. Piezo ceramics, you don't grow. You get a powder, you pack it together, you put it in an oven, and it's what's called a solid state reaction, where if you get things hot enough, they don't melt. But if you get them hot enough underneath the melting point, ions will still have ion mobility. They'll still move around and attach each other to the right parts to make your lead zirconate titanate, or whatever you're trying to make. It's probably going to be lead zirconate titanate, let's be honest with all y'all. So that was introduction of my kind of embarrassing moment, calling the manufacturer for fused quartz, which I should have not. I don't know if I should have known, because I didn't know any better. It was amorphous, and it was the same in every direction. But piezo ceramics are not amorphous. So when you make piezo ceramics, like you get them out of the oven, fresh, you smell it. They don't have long range order. Basically, they're grains, but all the grains kind of have their crystalline directions oriented differently. Because two grains next to each other, let's say one grain has an orientation goes that way, one has an orientation goes this way, they're not aligned. But when you apply that electric field and during the pulling process to get the polarizations aligned, first of all, they're not all aligned perfectly. Like you can have like a grain right, like this in one side, and grain like a little bit, crooked, but in general, like on average, there will be net polarization, because on average, like let's say like they're just like my fingers, like on average they're pointing in the same direction. So you do have crystal order. It's not amorphous. It's ceramic, but it's not isotropic either. So if you take it's not the same properties in every direction. And the reason is because once you align all the polarization vectors and the ions, switch toward the location which gives you your polarization, which is going to net in a single direction, you now have kind of a carbon fiber type of rod behavior. So if you look down into the PZT, like let's say where you put the electrode, so you pulled like a disc, and you look down into it, you would notice like these. There won't actually be fibers, obviously, there's a ceramic, they're grains, but the polarization vectors are kind of like fibers. So if you think about looking at your piezo ceramic head on, it looks like this in terms of material properties, a carbon fiber rod. So it has a different property in this direction, and if you look at it on the side, it's going to have the same properties if you kind of stretch it out on the width, perpendicular to the polarization direction. That specific phenomenon is called transversely isotropic, and there's a great Wikipedia article for that, but that's really helps to explain anisotropic behavior of piezo ceramics, because it can be confusing, because if you see this huge matrix of stuff and people are saying it's anisotropic, and that is something not covered in, let's say, undergraduate material. I mean, it might be covered in graduate studies, but a lot of folks don't have like that reinforcement in things they've taken in graduate school, so they don't understand that as well as they might otherwise if that was kind of a continuous topic they studied. So I just want to say that piezo ceramics are transversely isotropic once you pull them. They're like a carbon fiber rod, so they have a unique direction in the thickness and also laterally, which is called the one direction. The thickness is the 3, the perpendicular kind of directions are the 2 and 1, which are equivalent for piezo ceramics. So you've been watching episode number 62 of the Piezo Shock Show with your host, Dr. Shikani. If you need help developing piezo transducers, understanding how variability might be playing into your device, how do you characterize it, how do you adjust your device for it, then contact me, and I'll have some information in the description for you to get the help you need. All right, thank you, and I'll see you in the next episode.